Night falls over the dusty playground of a rural African school. The swings are still, the classrooms locked, but something remains here, heavy and watching. Imagine 60 children standing where the grass meets the bush line, frozen, their voices strangled in their throats. They are not running, not laughing, not fighting over games. They are staring past the fence, into bright daylight, at something that should not exist. No adults, no teachers, just the shrill insect drone and a strange, almost metallic hum, creeping in from the tree-line. Some of the younger ones feel their minds go blank with fear. Others feel something worse, like words being pressed into their thoughts from outside. Years later, many will say they can still see the black, almond-shaped eyes. They claim they still feel the warning, echoing in their heads. Across decades of interviews and investigations, not one of those children has ever conclusively recanted. Instead, their stories have sharpened, darkened, and grown heavier. Together, this is the Ariel School encounter of 1994, one of the most chilling mass sightings ever recorded. On the morning of September 16, 1994, Ariel School sat on the outskirts of Ruwa, a farming area about 20 kilometers from Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe. Ariel was a private school, serving mainly middle-class families, with pupils from diverse racial and cultural backgrounds. At the time, the country was still adjusting to life after colonial rule, but for the children that day the concerns were simple: recess, homework, the heat. The campus was bordered on one side by open scrubland, dotted with thorn trees and tall grass. Beyond the playground and a low wire fence lay a stretch locals sometimes called the bush, an undeveloped field that drew snakes, insects, and the occasional stranger passing through. Teachers knew it as a place to warn children about, not because of anything supernatural, but because it was out of bounds for several days before the incident. Zimbabwean media had been reporting strange lights in the night sky. Radio and newspapers carried stories of bright objects maneuvering in ways witnesses could not explain. Many adults dismissed these as misidentifications or gossip. According to later interviews, very few of the Ariel students had paid attention. By that Friday morning, pupils were thinking about snacks and recess under the high white sun overhead. Shortly before 10:30 that morning, the teachers went inside for a staff meeting. The children, aged between about 6 and 12, were released into the yard for recess. The older students drifted toward the far edge of the playground, closer to the fence and the scrub beyond. For once there were no adults watching. According to multiple testimonies, the first sign that something was wrong was not a sound, but an absence of sound. Several children later said that the birds stopped calling. The usual shouting and running slowed, then stalled. Near the fence, a few pupils noticed flashes of silver between the trees. Some thought they were seeing a strange vehicle, maybe a tractor or helicopter. Others remember a disc-like object, small, bright, and gliding silently above the power lines that ran through the field. It seemed, in their words, to hop from place to place, vanishing and reappearing with impossible smoothness. Then, according to the children, it descended. They describe an object landing or hovering just beyond the fence line, on or above a small rise in the ground. It was no larger than a classroom, metallic, with a domed top. No engine noise, no dust, just a solid, unnatural presence sitting where only grass and thorn bushes should have been. Some of the children ran closer, ignoring the out-of-bounds rule in their curiosity. Others stayed where they were, gripped by a fear they could not explain. A few of the youngest began to cry. At this point, the accounts begin to diverge in small details, yet remain eerily consistent in their core. Description: the children speak of figures emerging onto the craft, or suddenly standing beside it without any visible door opening. They were described as very short, perhaps a meter tall, with thin bodies, oversized heads, and large black eyes that seemed to absorb the light. Some witnesses recall tight-fitting dark suits. Others remember shimmering, almost featureless bodies. The beings moved with jerky, weightless steps, heads turning slowly as if scanning the children. Even from a distance, many pupils said they felt those eyes probing straight into their minds that day. For many of the children, the most frightening moment came when one of the beings moved closer to the fence. Several witnesses, interviewed separately, describe it gliding rather than walking, stopping only a few meters from the nearest pupils. According to the testimony of then 11-year-old student Emily Trim, the figure stood directly in front of her. She later told researchers that its eyes locked onto hers, and that, in that instant, everything else seemed to fade. She reported an overwhelming sense of messages pouring into her mind. Though no mouth moved and no audible voice was heard, other children told Harvard psychiatrist John Mack and local investigator Cynthia Hines similar stories. They spoke of sudden images and feelings about the environment, technology, and a future where the earth was damaged or destroyed. Some remembered pictures of ruined forests and poisoned air. Others only recall raw panic, as if an invisible hand had reached inside their thoughts and squeezed. A number of pupils said they tried to look away but could not. One described feeling frozen, her legs numb, heart hammering, while the creature simply watched. To the children, it seemed that time stretched, turning seconds at the fence into something like an endless, silent interrogation for them. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the object was gone. Some children remember it lifting straight up and vanishing. Others recall simply blinking and realizing the beings were no longer there. When the spell broke, the yard erupted into chaos. Several pupils ran back toward the school building, screaming. The teachers, emerging from their meeting, found a crowd of distressed children talking over one another, some crying, some shaking. According to statements from staff, the pupils were adamant that something extraordinary had just occurred near the fence. Many were unwilling to go back outside. The headmaster, Colin Mackey, began taking accounts, asking the children to describe what they had seen. Over the next days, they were asked to draw the craft and figures. Independently, many produced remarkably similar sketches: disc-shaped objects, small humanoid beings with large dark eyes, and a scene fixed at the edge of the playground by the alien-looking bush. Soon, parents began hearing rumors. In the weeks after the encounter, many Ariel pupils struggled to sleep. According to later interviews, children reported nightmares of the beings beside their beds, or of the playground falling silent again. Some became clingy, refusing to be left alone even in daylight. When psychiatrist John Mack interviewed them, he focused on their emotional reality. On video, several shake and cry as they repeat the same details: the huge eyes, the messages, the feeling of being frozen. Decades later, as adults, they still speak of anxiety, mistrust of technology, and an uneasy sense that the warning they received has never stopped echoing inside them. Skeptical relatives could not calm them. Nearly 30 years later, the Ariel School case remains one of the most intensively documented mass sightings involving children. Explanations range from visiting beings to shared fantasy, cultural contamination, or misinterpreted strangers in the field. Yet no clear hoax has ever been proven, and the witnesses have largely stood by their accounts. So what exactly did they see? And why does it still matter?